7.19 parts per million. The highest lead reading ever found in an American lipstick. And it wasn't a fluke. The FDA's own test found lead in all 400 shades it checked. There is no known safe level of lead in your blood. Tonight I'm ranking the 10 absolute worst, and exposing the 5 that got it right. On any of them? Drop the name in the comments. Number 10 is the one people refuse to believe. Walk into any Sephora and you'll see it glowing under the lights. Dior in gold letters on a tube that costs more than a week of coffee. Luxury. Elegance. The treat-yourself purchase after a rough week. But here's the twist. When the campaign for Safe Cosmetics, an independent watchdog group, not the FDA, ran its own study back in 2007, Dior's lipstick showed up with lead in it. Now let me be completely transparent with you because I don't do vague scares. This is a different study than the FDA data I'll reference later, and its numbers run lower. Dior's Addict formula came back around 1.3 parts per million, above the average of every lipstick tested, but the lowest reading on today's list. You could argue Dior is on a technicality. Trace contamination is still contamination. So why is it here at all? Because of the mineral pigments used to build that jewel-toned color. Lead isn't added to lipstick on purpose. It hitches a ride inside the iron oxides and mica dust that create the shade, and Dior in gold letters doesn't change chemistry. Dior promised luxury. What you got was lead. Number 9 might break your heart a little. Burt's Bees, the lip balm your mom kept in her purse, the brand with the little bee that promises nature in everything it makes. Natural is the entire identity. And natural is exactly why you'd never expect it on this list. But here's the lesson of tonight, and I want you to remember it. Natural does not mean lead-free. Burt's Bees Lip Shimmer in Rhubarb, that deep berry color your aunt swears by, tested at 1.5 parts per million. Not the worst number you'll see today by a long shot, but above the FDA average and proof that clean marketing and clean chemistry are two completely different things. The pigments giving that berry shade its punch come straight from the earth. And the earth? It contains lead. It's in the soil, in the clay, in the mineral dust. Natural was never a safety guarantee. It was a label. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That little bee on the tube is cute, but it never ran a lab test. Burt's promised you nature. What you got was a side of metal. Number 8 is the one you never think to question because it's just there. Sonia Kashuk. Sleek black and white packaging in every Target makeup aisle, positioned at eye level, priced so reasonably it feels like the smart choice. Not luxury. Not natural. Just everyday, which is exactly why it made this list. Because when you're standing in that aisle at Target, nobody is thinking about heavy metals. You're thinking about shade names and whether it'll survive lunch. But the FDA's testing didn't skip the mid-range brands, and neither will I. Sonia Kashuk's lip color came back at 1.9 parts per million. Not terrifying on its own, but remember there is no known safe level. And the pigments that make those pretty pinks and mauves? Same mineral sources. Same trace contamination. The only difference between this tube and the luxury one is the price you paid and the confidence you felt. Because nobody tells you this in a Target aisle, the checkout line doesn't scan for lead. The FDA wasn't shopping, it was testing. Sonia promised everyday color. What you got was everyday lead. Number 7 is a history lesson. Avon, the brand that started in 1886 before the FDA even existed, built by door-to-door sales ladies who turned it into a billion-dollar empire. Ding dong, Avon calling. Heritage, trust. Generations of women, your grandmother, maybe your mother, swore by that little catalog. And now the pattern starts to get scary because look at what Avon's shades have in common with the rest of this list. They're bold, deep reds, rich berries, statement colors. And statement colors need more pigment. More pigment means more mineral means more room for trace lead. Avon's ultra color rich in that classic red? 2.6 parts per million. You feel it creeping up? Every brand on this list beats the one before it, and the mechanism never changes. The louder the color, the higher the number. Watch that pattern closely, because from here the numbers climb faster than the price tags. Avon promised a century of trust. What you got was heavy metal hiding in the red. And the pattern is only getting started. Number 6 is where I have to be fair, because you'll hear this name and think, that's too big to be dirty. Revlon. Hollywood's favorite. A red so iconic it has its very own name. Revlon Red. And you're right, Revlon is massive, and that's actually part of the story. When I went through the FDA's full dataset, all 400 shades, I found that 22% of the top 100 most contaminated lipsticks were Revlon. Fairness caveat, a brand making 300 shades fills more list slots than a brand making 10. That's just math, but when the math keeps repeating, it stops being coincidence and becomes a pattern. One specific shade, Revlon Super Lustrous and Cherry Blossom, hit 3.0 parts per million. And here's the part that bothers me the most, the silence. No recall. No warning. No, we fixed it. Just color on shelves for decades. Revlon promised Hollywood glamour. What you got was a lead role you never auditioned for. Quick pause. If you want the truth about what's in your food, your makeup, and your medicine cabinet, hit like and subscribe. This channel exposes what the labels won't. Now let's keep climbing. And right here, right now, I need you to be honest with yourself. Count how many of these 6 brands are sitting in your makeup bag today. Count them out loud right now. 1, 2, 3, however many you landed on, that's how many tubes of pigment you're currently trusting with zero information about what's inside them. Drop that number in the comments below. Be completely honest. And here's a spoiler. By the time we reach the top of this list, I'm going to ask you to guess the company behind it, and most of you are going to guess wrong. Now let's talk about the brands where this stops being a background detail and starts being a pattern. Number 5 is the brand that explains exactly how all of this happens. Stargazer. You've seen it at Hot Topic, at mall kiosks, in the back pages of alt magazines, the punk rock lipstick, the electric blue and vampire black shades that scream, I'm not like everyone else. Rebellion. Anti-establishment. And if a punk brand seems like an odd pick for a heavy metal expose, that's exactly the point. This isn't about attitude. It's about pigment. And here's the great irony of ironies. Stargazer's shade, Sensational, tested at 4.12 parts per million. Remember the FDA average across all 400 lipsticks? 1.1 parts per million. This tube is running at almost 4 times the average. 4 times the national average. And look at the colors. This brand lives in the loudest, most extreme shades on the market, which means it's packing more pigment per tube than almost anyone else. More pigment, more metal. The brand that sold you freedom from the mainstream was quietly serving up the highest concentration this list has seen so far. And if you think this only happens to edgy indie brands, you're about to be very wrong, because the next 3 names are brands your mom, your sister, and your coworker all use every single day. Stargazer promised rebellion. What you got was 4 times the average, and zero explanation. Number 4 is where I started to get genuinely uncomfortable, because this is the brand that markets itself as the girl next door. CoverGirl. Easy, breezy, beautiful. The brand your teenage daughter probably uses right now. The brand that made Maybe She's Born With It a national catchphrase. And it spends more on advertising than small countries spend on education. So here's what all that marketing was distracting you from. CoverGirl put not 1 but 2 shades in the top 10 of the FDA's test. The first came back at 4.92 parts per million. The second? 4.28, 2 different shades. 2 different formulas. Nearly identical results. And you don't need a chemistry degree to know that when 2 products from the same factory come back with the same contamination fingerprint, that's not a fluke, that's a sourcing decision. Somewhere in CoverGirl's supply chain, the mineral pigments in those shades are coming from a source that's been bringing lead along for the ride long enough to show up twice. CoverGirl promised the girl next door. What you got was a pattern you were never supposed to find. Number 3 is the one that kills the most expensive myth on this list. That paying more protects you. NARS. A single tube costs $30. Sometimes more. It sits in that glossy black case next to a name that whispers artistry, editorial, Fashion Week. You're not just buying lipstick, you're buying the idea that premium means purer. It's the same psychology as a $40 bottle of water, and the FDA doesn't care about your psychology. Here's what the FDA found. 2 NARS shades, including Red Lizard, the iconic red you see on every beauty page, came back at 4.93 and 4.89 parts per million. 2 different tubes. Nearly identical readings. Both sitting near the top of the worst list in the country. Now think about what you paid for that tube. Then think about this. The cheapest contaminated lipstick on this list and the most expensive one are drawing from the same contaminated well. The price tag was never a filter for lead. It was a filter for your wallet. NARS promised artistry. What you got was the same pigment problem at quadruple the price. Before I show you number 2 and number 1, guess something for me? One parent company owns 5 of the 10 worst lipsticks on this entire list. 5 out of 10. Here's your hint. You probably owned one of their tubes as a teenager. Drop your guess in the comment section now before I reveal it. If you're right, I want to hear about it. Number 2 is where the industry's biggest secret starts to crack open. L'Oreal. Because you're worth it. The most recognized beauty slogan on the planet, attached to the largest cosmetics company in the world. Think about that. The data says you were worth 7 parts per million of lead in a single shade nobody ever flagged. And L'Oreal's color Riche and Volcanic, a deep dramatic red, tested at 7.00 parts per million. The second highest reading in the entire FDA study. Second. Only one lipstick in America tested higher, and I'll get to it in a second. But first, remember that hint I gave you? 5 of the top 10 most contaminated lipsticks in the FDA test fall under one corporate umbrella, and that umbrella is L'Oreal. You've already seen some of those 5 today. The worst of the worst list isn't full of random brands. It's full of one company's supply chain. L'Oreal promised you were worth it. What you got was 7 parts per million you were never told about. Number 1. The climax. The single highest lead reading in the entire FDA dataset. All 400 lipsticks, every brand we've talked about today and every brand we haven't. 7.19 parts per million. And the face of that record isn't some obscure import or niche luxury brand. It's Maybelline. The most ordinary lipstick imaginable. The first lipstick most American girls ever own. The one your dad grabbed at the drugstore before homecoming because it cost $8 and it was right there in the aisle. It's not a product you seek out, it's the product that finds you. Maybe she's born with it. That was the slogan. But the FDA's 2012 test found lead in Maybelline's Color Sensational, in Pink Petal, a shade so everyday you've seen it in 100 school bathrooms, at 7.19 parts per million. Let me put that number in perspective. The cleanest lipstick in that same federal study came back at 0.026 parts per million. That means Maybelline's tube carries more than 275 times the lead of the cleanest product sitting on the same shelf. 275 times. Both for sale at the same store at the same time with the same old trust me packaging. And here's the detail I can't stop thinking about. Maybelline is owned by L'Oreal. The number 2 brand on this list. The same supply chain. The same pigments. The same silence. Let that sink in. The most popular lipstick in America, the one your daughter's best friend is probably wearing to school this week, is the same formula the FDA ranked dead last for lead. And now the disclaimer you deserve, because I promised you honesty and I'm not here to panic you. When the FDA published this data, they said the levels found don't pose a health risk at typical use. Trace amounts measured in parts per million. Doctors have written whole textbooks about what lead does to a developing brain. And regulators have said repeatedly that when it comes to kids, there is no safe number. Now think about who your daughter shares her lipstick with. Or who shares yours. I'm not telling you to burn your collection tonight. What I'm telling you is simpler and more honest. You were never given the information to decide for yourself. That's not a panic. That's a problem. So let me show you the other side, the brands that looked at the same data and decided to do something about it. If the biggest names in beauty won't tell you, who will? Let's flip this list. 5 brands that actually did it differently. When you think clean makeup, your brain probably jumps to expensive boutique brands. But the first one I trust is the one you can actually afford, Gabriel Cosmetics. Gabriel's lipsticks sit in the budget lane, under $20, sometimes under $12, built on a staggeringly simple promise. No lead, full stop. The company publishes a lead-free claim on their color line and backs it with third-party lab testing. Full transparency now because this is how you know I'm not cheerleading. Gabriel doesn't publish specific parts per million numbers for every single shade the way I wish they would. Their claim is lead-free, not here's our ppm spreadsheet. Take it for what it is. A genuine, testable commitment from a brand that doesn't have billions in marketing to hide behind. Think about that. A company with no billion-dollar ad budget still pays for third-party labs, while the giants who tested highest published silence. Size isn't safety. Priorities are. Gabriel promised affordable clean. What you got was proof that clean doesn't have to cost $40. The second brand on the good list is the one that solved the problem at the source. 100% pure. Most clean brands swap one pigment for another and call it a day, the same chemistry. 100% pure does something genuinely different. They color their lipsticks with fruit pigments. Actual fruit. Cocoa butter, black tea, real fruit extracts, instead of the petroleum-derived dyes and iron oxide pigments that bring trace lead along for the ride. No mineral pigment, no mineral contamination. No iron oxides. No mica dust. No ground-up minerals at all, the entire contamination pathway disappears. It's the only brand on either list that changed the mechanism instead of just changing the marketing. Honest caveat. This applies to their fruit-pigmented lipstick line specifically, the one that's been third-party tested and published. Wander into their other categories and you'll need to do the same homework I made you do on the bad list. But for lipstick, 100% Pure is the brand that actually answered the question I've been asking all video. Where is the lead coming from? 100% Pure promised fruit. What you got was chemistry you can trace. And the third is the one I recommend when you refuse to compromise on feel. Because let's be honest, some clean lipsticks feel like wearing a crayon. Kosas is the brand beauty editors actually use backstage, and it cracked the problem by focusing on what a lipstick is supposed to do, feel like nothing and look like everything. Their weightless lip color is pigment-rich, comfortable, and here's the part that matters. Its formulas have been screened against the EWG Skin Deep database, one of the most widely used independent ingredient checkers in the country. Because here's the thing. Kosas is what you get when a brand decides clean doesn't have to mean compromise. It's sold right at Sephora, and it still publishes what's inside. Honest caveat, EWG's own database flags some Kosas ingredients as moderate hazard, due to limited data. Not confirmed contamination, just limited transparency. Kosas isn't perfect. But it's the brand that treats you like an adult. Real ingredients, real disclosure, real testing, no hunting required. Kosas promised luxury you can wear. What you got was a name you can actually verify.